Terror and the Terrified by Jasim Khwaja. I came out of the office to have lunch. Rather, it was as if I had been released on parole. Going for lunch was the only legal pretext for us employees to be able to leave the office. But the condition was that we had to return to our desk by a certain time. I was glancing at various carts, thinking about what to eat, when I caught sight of my favorite dish, potato kebabs. I at once ordered two kebabs and sat down on a bench. I looked at my watch. There were still another 50 minutes between my freedom and the barack. I began to read a newspaper lying on the bench. The headline was smeared in Karachi's blood. Extremists had shifted from their localities and spilled blood, with their fights and bloodletting, all over the city. It was for this reason that they had divided into various groups that were fighting against one another to gain the control of the city. They seemed to think that when they did such things, they could instill terror into the hearts of the people of their areas. In a way, this seems to be right because these terrorist elements keep the residents of their areas hostage because of their power. They criminally extort money from them and spend their energy in murdering and kidnapping. An elderly person sitting beside me said to me, "Son, are you an employee of this company?" He pointed towards my office with his hand. He had seen the advertisement fixed outside the office, which said that the company was in need of a worker. He had followed me as I had come out of the office. "Son, I wish to get a job in this company. Will you help me in this regard?" The person looked to me around 50 years old and needy, but our company needed a young man. However, the person was speaking so humbly that I did not have the heart to refuse him. "Look, uncle, the big boss interviews people for jobs. Inshallah, you will get the job," I said in order to comfort him. "Inshallah, inshallah, may God keep you safe." He patted my shoulder with affection. Meanwhile, the kebabs had arrived and we ate together. I asked him, "Saleem Sahib, since when have the conditions of Karachi been so bad?" "I have only seen thieves, robbers, and hooligans around for as long as I can remember." At this, the elderly man looked towards me with reddened eyes. I became a bit afraid. Water began to flow from his red eyes. When his eyelashes had been drenched with the wine of tears, the goblet spilled over. He heaved a deep sigh and said, "No, my son, it was not so. No one knows who has cast an evil eye on the city. The city had a distinguished place in the whole country. Its splendor and bazaars were no less than those of any other city. Please say a good word about me to your boss. I am in the dire need of job." "Son, do say a good word about him. He seems to be very distressed and needy," said the vendor, who had been listening to our conversation. I nodded my head. No sooner did we stand up from the bench than 2 or 3 persons ran past us, and we could hear the sound of things falling and breaking. Suddenly, we heard the crack of bullets, and the very next moment, 3 motorcycles stopped almost in front of us. The motorcyclists had modern weapons in their hands, and they began to fire at the people present there. We all began to run. I ran towards the office. Saleem Sahib also ran behind me. I had covered the distance of a few steps when I felt that I was not being followed by Saleem Sahib. I turned around only to see that he was lying on the ground and that he had been hit in his head by a bullet. While I was still looking at him, I collided with another person who had fallen to the ground and I fell down. I fell down so hard that darkness prevailed before my eyes. I thought I had also been hit by a bullet. I was not able to decipher anything in this state of confusion. There was screaming all around. People were running here and there in order to save their lives. A person to my right was firing his weapon indiscriminately. He fired at whoever he caught sight of. On my left, the body of a child was lying on the ground. Perhaps he was going home after school. A stream of blood ran from his abdomen towards me. Another boy, who was perhaps his friend or brother, had been wounded and was crying, "Mummy, mummy." Countless people lay near my office building, some writhing in pain and some lying still. Many were wounded and were crying. The killing had stopped now, and the murderers had departed on their motorcycles after completing their task without any hesitation. There was no trace of the police. There was blood everywhere. Small streams of blood flowed towards a point in a pattern of different angles. I looked at Saleem Sahib once again. His eyes were cast towards me and still seemed to be making a request for a job. One of his hands was on his chest, which had also been pierced by a bullet. Eyes had dried. He had cried all his years and there were no more tears left in his body. It was just a few minutes earlier that Saleem Sahib was narrating his past and requesting a job, and I had comforted him. He had looked calm and happy at my comforting him. His story had ended, but the story had not yet ended. All the stories of the city of Karachi were now the stories of terror and of terrified people.